Shelley Winter Show, live, local, topical, and relevant. I had a chance to speak exclusively to the chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia, Charlie Bailey. Here's how it went. I'm in the studio with Charlie Bailey, who's the chair of the Democrat Party of Georgia. Welcome to the Shelley Winter Show, Charlie.
Thank you, Shelley, for having me. The Democratic Party of Georgia.
What did I say? Democrat? Is that my? Can you explain why the distinction?
Well, I don't know when it started, but it seemed that some folks on the right started saying Democrat sometime in the last 20 years, I feel like.
And I think that's where I got it from. So
yeah.
I didn't mean to do it as a slight.
But
you do want to make the correction because there is a distinct difference.
Sure.
So first question, you had a great night, Tuesday night. A lot of people on my side are saying, well, the races that were won were Democrat states. I've pushed back on that. But how does Charlie Bailey, leader of the Democratic Party of Georgia, feel about Tuesday?
Well, we feel really good about what happened here in this election and on Tuesday night. I mean, mostly for the working people of this state. That's who this win really was for. You know, what was on the ballot is, Republican actions by these two public service commissioners that raised the rates of average Georgians an average of $500 a year over the past 3 years. And they had a chance, the voters, to say, you know what, we ain't got to put up with that. And we made sure as the state party that we organized around the state and that we spent major money in a media campaign that's not been done in 19 years. Also, that was the last time we won non-federal
media campaign
race.
Just around those two races.
Just those two races, yes, sir. We put $250,000 into a TV and digital statewide ad campaign, crystallizing this message about affordability, and it both turned out Democrats, yes, but we also got switchers. You know, we got a bunch of people that have voted for Republicans in the past, whether they call themselves Republicans or they call themselves independents, and they voted for Democrats this time because they knew that these Democrats were going to do better by them and their families' pocketbook.
Do you think the messaging coming out of the right, the messaging of we don't want to go the way of California, and I questioned that messaging because what I thought was, well, if your rate is already high, the argument is I'm already in California. Do you think that hurt the Republicans? And then also, I want to question B to that question is, do you think a lot of Republicans simply stayed home because their rates were high and they weren't going to vote for a Democrat as a switcher, as you call it, but they just stayed home? Do you think that was what was going on our side?
So to the first, yes, I think that message almost can boomerang. I mean, you can't message around reality, you know, and the reality is you put it yourself. Wait, my bills have already gone up and y'all did that. You can't point the finger anywhere else. You're there. And so when you try sometimes to message around reality, it can boomerang and get even worse because then people are saying, hey, you think I'm too stupid to understand.
Fair enough.
And so I think that I think that did have an effect. To your second question, it's always a mix of those things. There were people that might call themselves Republicans, or maybe they've just voted for Republicans and they voted for two Democrats. But undoubtedly, and when we get a deeper dive, you know, when we get all the information back, we'll be able to answer this more fully. But undoubtedly, at the same time you have people that get depressed, meaning they may not necessarily come out and vote for a Democrat, but doggone, I ain't gonna vote for these two folks.
Right. We're in the studio with Charlie Bailey. He is the chairman of the State Democratic Party of Georgia. Had a big victory this Tuesday. On my show this summer, when you were elected, there was back and forth. People were upset, but you're the guy. And I said back then, Charlie Bailey's going to go all out in these races in November. But not only the statewide races. Did you combine the messaging with the statewide races? Because you've got some victories. Ackworth a young lady in Ackworth beat an incumbent. She's a Democrat. You had victories all over the state in places, Alpharetta and Johns Creek, places like that. Can you talk? Did you combine your efforts, or were these just the way the demographics are going?
Well, I think, all those candidates deserve a hell of a lot of credit. I mean, they did a lot of work, but we did do joint efforts, not in every single town, but in particular in Roswell, where Mary Robichaud is in a runoff right now with an incumbent, nonpartisan, but Republican mayor.
It's funny, we all say nonpartisan, but we all know this.
Everybody knows.
Right.
Everybody knows. We flipped a mayor's race in Noonan. Again,
and was that something you sought to do? When you took over in the summertime, you looked at these situations and you sought to do that. It didn't just happen by itself.
Yes, we knew that we thought there would be opportunity, based on the environment that we are in. And look, we're not separated in Georgia from the national environment. Mm-hmm. And you can see a through line of affordability through Georgia, Virginia, up to New Jersey. And so whenever you've got that kind of dynamic, and we thought, too, that if we can turn out more voters and convince some voters to vote for Democrats instead of Republicans, we could up the turnout in some of these places and make the Democrats that are running, make it a bit easier for them. For a comparison, what I'm talking about, I think in the last two of these off-year elections, 23 and 21, you had about 600,000 people vote statewide. This time there's 1.56 million.
Even though it was even though we all, as media not personalities, but media experts or pundits, whatever you want to call me, we see it as low turnout. You're saying it was a great turnout compared to other off-year years.
Bingo. 1 million more. That's
right.
Not like a small increase. That is a big increase. And it's not as big as a midterm, right? Our last two midterms are about 3.9 to 4 million. But if it's a lot bigger than these races normally are, and that is, we knew if we could drive up that would have added benefits for some of these people running in the municipals around the state.
Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? The second part of this interview is going to play after the break. I just want to cover a couple things. I want you all to pay attention, Democrat or Republican, I don't care who you are, but I want you to pay attention to something Mr. Bailey said, Charlie Bailey said. You can't message around reality. I want that to sink into everybody's heads. You can't message around reality. So no matter what he's saying, and he's saying it very clearly to everybody, Democrats and Republicans, you can't message around what people are going through. You can't tell them that things are better when they're not. You can't tell them there's nothing to see here when there is something to see here. This is what he's saying. He's saying it to everybody. You can't message around reality. The other thing he said very clearly is that there was 1 million more votes in this off-year election than others. 1 million more. Republicans, just to give you an idea, Republicans going into the PSC race said there were going to be 90,000 more votes. They were at a 90,000 vote deficit because of the municipal races going on around the state. 1 million more votes. Y'all keep playing around. This state is going to be Cobb County because of the Republican Party in Georgia. I'm going to cover more of that, but I want you to hear the second half of my interview, exclusive interview with the chair of the Georgia Democratic Party, Charlie Bailey. We'll be right back.